Little better? Yeah? Okay. Thank you all so much for coming out tonight. Is that okay? My volume? Okay. Thank you so much to CMU Libraries for hosting this exhibition and the speaker event tonight, and for believing in the power of the arts and the importance of sharing artists' voices. Thank you to my student assistants, Fern Boris and Aubrey Dickens, who are in the back making sure that everything is running smoothly for us this evening behind the scenes. And most of all, thank you to our guest artist, Taurus Burns, down here in the front, for traveling all this way to Central Michigan University to share his artwork, experiences, stories, and wisdom with us tonight. Two quick orders of business. I just wanted to remind you all that there is a reception following the artist talk in the Baber Room, so please come down to the Baber Room Gallery following the reception and check out the work in person if you haven't already. You can meet and ask questions of Taurus and have some snacks. And then also there will be a question and answer period after this conversation tonight, so store up your questions to ask Taurus when he's finished speaking. Okay, so I'd like to share a little bit with you about Taurus. I first met Taurus 23 years ago, back in 1999. It was my very first year teaching at the College for Creative Studies in Detroit. And Taurus was a student in my very beginning sculpture class, my first class that I taught there, and it was a beginning sculpture class. It didn't take me very long to realize that Taurus was an incredibly dedicated and motivated student. He was a painfully shy student, yet an extremely hardworking and talented student and artist who also clearly had big things to say. Not long before that, I too was a painfully shy art student, fresh out of graduate school just the year prior, and still am, a shy introvert by nature, and was just transitioning into this new role of pretending to have enough confidence and a strong enough voice to fill my newly earned teacher seat. And I quickly saw and empathized with Taurus's strong voice trapped in a quiet body. But in truth, my own history had nothing to do with what I saw in him, because even though Taurus was very quiet, everyone saw Taurus's strong voice through his work, because he was so committed to being great at his craft, to honing his skills, and to working hard and taking on unique challenges in order to communicate his ideas. Even as a student, Taurus consistently produced thoughtful and incredibly impressive work, regardless of the medium. He created and shared his work with public humility, yet always with a quiet confidence. Everyone knew and noticed Taurus and his work, even when he spoke very little. All the way back in 1999, and I'm guessing long before that as well, Taurus was exploring ways of finding his voice related to his experience as a biracial human. I remember early on in one of our classes, there was an assignment to create a life-size portrait bust modeled in clay from which we would make a plaster mold and cast the portrait as a single casting. To give you an idea of the way he approached being a student, Taurus made his bust triple the size of everyone else's, and instead of making the required single cast, Taurus wanted to make 3 casts of his portrait. Instead of casting in a single material, Taurus wanted to cast in 3 different materials. This also meant he needed to learn how to make a much more complicated and expensive type of mold, and to learn how to cast in multiple mediums. He was in the studio many hours working through these additional processes, and ultimately created a beast of a mold and learned how to work with more advanced casting methods and materials, and made 3 versions of himself. 1 cast in black cement, 1 cast in gray cement, and 1 cast in white plaster. He positioned all of them face to face to stare at one another. It was through this early experience that I got to see his commitment to his work and to his ideas, and his willingness to go many extra miles beyond what was required in order to communicate beyond the basics of the assignment. And that was just the beginning of several years of his peers and teachers being awed and impressed with his work ethic, with his passion for making great work. He continued to make many other impressive works, exploring many concepts, including those of identity. His early explorations into identity were more introspective, less overt conversations or direct statements. Over the years since I moved away from the Detroit area, I've watched from a distance via social media as Taurus's work has evolved. I've watched his voice sharpen and strengthen, and witnessed his confident observations dazzle with painterly precision, while simultaneously searing through the hearts of many. Each time I'd see a new work posted, I'd find myself cheering him on from afar as his voice got more urgent and more clear. Racial tensions were re-escalating more publicly here in the States, and Taurus and his work were responding in full force with incredibly powerful and important works that were ripping my heart open, along with the hearts of many others based on the responses. His experience in the world has continued to inform his voice in ways that are vitally important, that need to be seen and heard and felt. While there are few painters out there more adept with paint and form than Taurus, and while he has made a great amount of formally studied and classically beautiful work, the work he is making now isn't always easy content, and it does not prioritize the comfort of the viewer. The work he is making now has urgent stories to tell and generates potent visceral responses and important conversations, which I believe is one of the greatest functions of an artist. Taurus is a highly respected painter who has shown his work nationally and internationally in galleries throughout Detroit and from Brooklyn, New York to London, England. He works full-time as a clay sculptor in automotive design for General Motors and manages to maintain a prolific painting and exhibition career outside of his full-time job. He maintains an active studio at the factory at 333 Midland in Highland Park, Michigan. Taurus has curated and juried numerous exhibitions and is also a muralist, a street painter, educator, and children's book illustrator. Taurus was once listed as Best Local Artist in Real Detroit Weekly and has been featured as one of the best local artists to collect in Our Detroit magazine. It is an absolute honor to host Taurus and his striking and important work here at CMU. You can follow him at taurusburns.com or on Instagram at zebra_Maine. Please join me in warmly welcoming Taurus Burns.
Hello. Geez, I don't know how to follow that up, Denise. That was amazing. Thanks. So it's really amazing to be here, and I can't thank Denise enough for inviting me to show up here. Sorry. Okay, so this is the work that I have in this show here is really the culmination of a lifetime of thinking about race, dealing with race, and trying to come to terms with my experiences growing up and throughout my adulthood, and my continued work at accepting myself, my biracial identity within a society that is still struggling with racial equity. So my plan tonight is to just give you a short background of my life and how I embraced my art career, and I'm going to take you through the development of my art over the years. So with that, let's begin. So like Denise said, I'm mixed, biracial as they say. I was born in 74. So before you have a chance to do the math to realize how old I am, I would just say that, my beautiful parents were just 19 when I was born, and they were married just 6 years after the Loving versus Virginia case that abolished anti-miscegenation laws that prevented interracial marriage. I knew at a pretty early age that I wanted to be an artist. I loved drawing. And over time, I really took to art as a way to express myself in ways that I didn't feel I could in other areas of my life. Really early on, it was a place where I could work through complicated emotions, difficult experiences. It was really a form of expression that I took to at an early age. So I knew early on that I wanted to be an artist. I was born in Kalamazoo. My dad was in the Army. I moved around a lot growing up, so I had a typical Army brat experience. But I've been in Michigan since high school. So as I entered adulthood, I found my way to this side of the east side of Michigan, to Detroit, to attend art school. I went to college for creative studies, like he said, where we met. Art school was a dream come true for me. Going into it, I didn't know a lot about art. You know, my parents are from small towns. You know, they're not artists. I had never been to museums before I came to art school. So, you know, they didn't know a lot about art, so they didn't have any, encouragement or advice to give me. But I found my way to art school with the encouragement of a mentor who I met at community college before I went to CCS. So art school was amazing. I entered art school with the dream of becoming the best figure painter around. Little did I know that there's tons of amazing figure painters out here today, but I really pushed myself to be the best I could. I took lots of academic classes. You know, I was really into the classically trained academic experience. I wanted to take as many real still life classes as I could, figure drawing and painting classes as I could. I did a lot of self-portraits and art at CCS when I was at home. And I really, did the best I could to just learn how to paint, mix colors, and I had dreams of getting my work into museums someday. So over time, as you go on in art school, you start to, you're encouraged to, find your ideas, like start to deal with concepts and ideas and themes. Around third or fourth year, I started to think about, what do I really want to talk about? There's things that I'd experienced with my family and in childhood that were kind of boiling beneath the surface, and I never really quite dealt with them with my family or in any other way. So I wanted to start to make art about it. So this painting on the right, it's not anybody that I know, but I wanted this old elderly white couple. They were kind of stand-ins for my grandparents. So my experience as a child was that my mom's dad, my grandfather, kicked her out of the family for marrying my dad and having me. And that was kind of a family secret all throughout my childhood. I learned about it later, but for years there was this difficult, there's this shame around that. So my mom had a relationship with my grandma, and this is the first time I've talked about this stuff in front of a group. So sorry if I'm stumbling through it, but I had a relationship with my grandmother because my mom and her were still talking, but we would go visit, and we'd have to leave before my grandfather came home because we were not allowed to be there. So through that experience, I just developed a sense of shame around my skin color because obviously it was a problem. So at CCS, these are early attempts to start to talk about those issues. Really, I was trying to create a painting of a memory that I never had. A loving grandparents who embraced me despite of my skin color. So created this idealized memory that I never quite had. And back at CCS, at the time, there wasn't a lot of conversations happening around race. CCS, the fine arts program at the time, wasn't very diverse. So, like Denise was saying, everybody, liked my paintings. They're like, oh, these are great. But as far as talking about race, everyone was like, it's not really like that anymore. So there wasn't a lot of encouragement for this kind of work. And I think, being a young artist at the time and still trying to find my way and find my voice, I think that got to me a lot more than I realized at the time. So when I graduated, or for my senior year, every senior has a thesis show. And rather than talk about race, I kind of turned inward. And so my subject was the psychological shadow. I was like, okay, I want to be a figurative artist, but, race, people don't want to really talk about race or look at race, so let's just go within and deal with like the dysfunctional aspect of our inner selves. So I created this series of kind of ethereal portrait figure paintings that were, in my mind, they were just like this inner self that was where our shame and where our shame live inside. They looked cool, but I don't really know how much they captured that. But this is how I finished up at CCS. After CCS, like any art student getting out of art school, you spend some time like trying to find your way. So for the next several years, I did the typical thing where I was looking at a lot of art history books, going to the museum, and trying to think about like how do I, trying to learn as much as I could from the masters, but also trying to find myself within that work, and thinking about how to like make that a contemporary painting that dealt with interracial issues in a very masterly way. So these were some early attempts at that. These are around 2004. I tried to, again, like the painting of the grandparents, like trying to create these ideal images of family that I never really quite experienced, but through art, I felt like I could create that and have that experience that I wish I'd had growing up, and make paintings that I wish I would have seen growing up that kind of validated my experience. So going on, I would do this a lot, like where I would focus on race and then kind of like turn away from it as because it was difficult to make those paintings, and other people seemed to be pretty uncomfortable talking about these issues. So I would go back and forth from realism and race to like making paintings where there was no race. On the left, there's an image of Robert Thompson, a black artist who created figurative work where like all the figures were these like bright primary colors. So they were like kind of multiracial but not racial at the same time. And I really liked his work. It reminded me of like these Garden of Eden scenes with multiracial figures. And I was in Detroit at the time, still living in Detroit after art school, and getting to know the city, spending a lot of time in the city, and also going back and forth between Detroit and the suburbs. So I became more and more aware of the difference between inner city and the suburbs, the economic depression in the city and the kind of affluence and comfort in the suburbs. And took the idea of a Garden of Eden scene and put a Detroit spin on it and made it the Ghetto of Eden. And imagine these like, the first man and the first woman living in this like really depressed world that God has created, and trying, through their innocence, they're still managing to find happiness together. This is another painting from around that time, and I was, really taking to Robert Thompson's work and exploring ways of like arranging figures, and I went back and forth between like very calm, harmonious, figurative scenes to something like this where it's just chaos, where everybody's fighting for space. And so after doing paintings like that for a while, I returned to realism. Those paintings, I enjoyed them, but I felt like they weren't really expressing, I felt like they were, getting more to the spiritual side of humanity, getting away from race, because, like, I wanted to get past the race. Everybody seemed to want to get past the race, so let's just not deal with the race. We're just like, oh, people here, we all bleed the same color, as they say. So I'm like, all right, we'll just skip race and just deal with like humans. But after a while, I felt like, I don't know if I'm a spiritual person. I don't know if these are really spiritual paintings, and I'm really kind of like not really dealing with the reality. So I returned to realism, and for the next 10 years, I did a lot of realist paintings. I actually did like hundreds of paintings. I consider this time period as my starving artist years. So this is just a sample of different kinds of work I was doing throughout that time. So like I said, I'm not originally from Detroit. So living in the city, at a certain point, around 2008, I had been there for 10 years, and I was still really felt like an outsider. So I started to get out and explore the city more and go to places that I wasn't familiar with. And, because I was going back and forth from the suburbs to Detroit and, interacting with people in the suburbs, there was a lot of animosity towards Detroit and the suburbs. And I'm like, I don't want to feel that way. I really want to get out and get to know the city for myself and, see what's out here. Like, I don't want to have these like preconceived negative ideas about the city. So I would get out and take a lot of photos around Detroit and go home and paint them. So the one on the top left is an example. And in that series of like Detroit landscapes, I did almost 300 paintings just based on Detroit. But also throughout that time, I was exploring other themes because, working on the landscapes, they were making me a much better painter, but they weren't really saying anything. And I had this like burning urge to like really talk about, my experiences. And just going back to the work at CCS, like the final senior thesis show, I remember sitting down with one of my professors at the time, and he had just read through my paper, and like the paper was great or whatever, but he's like, "Where are you in all of this?" I really had a hard time like really talking about myself and my experiences, or really, I don't know how to say it, but I think it'll come out in a bit. So I was doing a lot of landscape paintings. I'd paint still lifes at home, the top right one. I was playing around with color and, lack of color. And these the two on the top middle are early examples of me kind of playing around with black and white. And I felt that was a way of expressing a depressed, like a depression. And that's going to come up later. So also in this time, I kind of lost my head at a certain point. I was like, in my mid-30s, there was something that had been following me throughout my life that I was really not dealing with. And it really stemmed from childhood, from the issue with my grandfather. That was a big secret. Every family has its secrets, right? And for me, that was a secret that I don't remember how I learned about it, but when I did, it was really there was a lot of anger and shame around that I just not quite dealt with. And there was other stuff too, but that was kind of my introduction to racism, really, my first introduction to racism. First of many, but in my mid-30s, I kind of had a mental and emotional breakdown, and it led me to seek help, and that's a whole other story. So I think also, so once I got help, I started going to therapy and started working through these issues, and this thing about my grandfather that had always been there, I'd never really dealt with it, and in support groups, it started to come out, dealing with family dysfunction, working through the layers of that. And, finally, when I got to my grandfather, like I kind of had to mourn the relationship that I never had with him. They talk about how important our relationship is with our parents. And, of course, they have a huge impact on our development. But the relationship that we can have with our grandparents is also important. I don't know. I think you get that. But So my mom's side of the family, they're originally really like small town country folks. Every year they go deer hunting. There's probably a lot of people up here that do that kind of thing. And all my mom's brothers, my uncles, they would all go deer hunting together. And I kind of created this painting as a memory of a time with him that I never got to experience. And also, kind of dealing with my, anger as well. With the guy, the young man pointing a gun at the viewer. There's anger there, but also a pleasant memory that I created for myself. So this was kind of the beginning of me starting to deal with these issues that I had been buried and they were starting to come out. I was starting to work through them and, deal with the emotions. Like Denise was saying, at CCS, I was painfully shy. I was really cut off from my own emotions and really reserved and just, afraid to like open up and make myself vulnerable like I am right now. But this was like the beginning of me starting to right, I'm going to make these paintings. I'm working through this anger, but I'm also like kind of changing my experience into something that's positive and wonderful, but also acknowledging the hurt. Like I'm sure for all of you, it's hard to admit when somebody's hurt you, especially for a man. But never mind, that's probably sexist. So I'll just keep moving on. So also around that time, there was a big political change. And it's hard, like I don't like talking about politics, and I'm not going to, it really drives me crazy. And but at this time, Trump was elected, and he kind of rode in on this wave of racial fears and hate, and it was like very obvious that was happening. Yet, people loved it, But anyway, so I started to think I'm dealing with my own family issues while all these things are happening in the world around me, and here we have a president who is stoking these racist flames. And, where are we? What does this mean? We're in the 21st century, and here we're still dealing with racism. What do we do? What are we doing? So, my work started to take a turn, and I was beginning to deal with this depressive feeling about America in general and race relations. This painting on the right, actually, I was invited into a show in Detroit. It was 2017, and it was the 50th anniversary of the Detroit riot, or Detroit Rebellion, depending on who you talk to about it. And still, I had been in Detroit for 17, 18, 19 years at that point. But, I'm still feeling like an outsider and still, trying to get to know the city and the people in the city and the history of the city. And I got invited into the show, but obviously I wasn't in Detroit at the time. So I picked up this book that really spelled out Detroit's history and the great, migration of blacks from the South to Detroit to work in, there were so many jobs in the auto plants. But this huge influx of black people in Detroit caused this reaction in the white people in Detroit, where policies were put in place. Neighborhoods were kind of shut out from black people. A lot of redlining, as they say, and a lot more. I won't go into it, but it's really shocking, to think about that event, the riot when it happened. It was just generations of oppression and resource hoarding by the white community in Detroit, and it's no wonder this event was like a powder keg. So for me to make a piece of art about that experience, having not been there, But I was able to like imagine it through reading this book, and I wanted to create an image of an artist living in Detroit through that kind of experience, through that kind of oppression at the time. So in 2018, I had this breakout show called Troublemaker. I was invited to do a solo exhibit in Hamtramck, Michigan, and I had kind of dropped off the scene for a few years in Detroit. From 2006 to 2016, I was exhibiting like a madman, showing anywhere I could, making hundreds of paintings and all that good stuff. But like I said, I got to a point where that wasn't fulfilling, and it wasn't saying anything to me. Wasn't saying anything. And I kind of just had some life changes. I dropped off the scene for a while, and I spent some time really exploring my ideas and themes and really thinking about what I really wanted to do. And around this time, there were more and more videos of police shootings coming out, and they're just so traumatic and horrifying. And I decided that I wanted to, tackle that issue head on with this show. So it's just kind of overview of the gallery space. Not only was I, focusing my subject matter on on black men and law enforcement, killing black people, killing black men especially, and just like the stigma of blackness in this country. That became my focus. Rather than painting on canvases, I started working on these shaped surfaces. And really just trying to channel the trauma of seeing black men being killed into art, and kind of in a way holding America accountable in the art, at least. The one on the right is called The Mountaintop. On the bottom row are 3 civil rights leaders, who fought for racial equity and change, and they're all deceased. But on the top are 3 men who were killed by law enforcement, and just kind of a way of like thinking about racial progress over time. People always want to talk about racial progress. Like you talk about racism, people are like, well, things are better now. It's not as bad as it used to be. Like, sure, but it's still pretty messed up. These 2 paintings on the right, obviously, is like I took a scene from the video of Philando Castile right after he shot, and it's obviously a horrifying moment, and in a way, like what I want to say. Looking back, this was it was a difficult painting to do. I don't know if I should have done it. But at the time, it was like I wanted everybody else to feel what I was feeling. So here, look at this. How does this make you feel? On the left is a painting where I was trying to counteract the image of the fear around black men, and look into artists that I looked up to over the years, writers, visual artists, musicians. There's Biggie Smalls is up there, comedians, Richard Pryor, who they're all dead. This is another black and white painting at the time, because something about that, just the depression of this subject, seems to be sharper when it's in black and white. Also, you'll notice at the bottom there's these 2 ravens, and there was a raven in the other piece. Going back, to the painting about the Detroit Rebellion. That was, I think, the first time I used a raven, and I always loved the Edgar Allan Poe poem, The Raven. And to me, the raven, having a raven in a painting, it's like they're present at. It's like they're there watching a person slowly go insane. And it's, they're kind of a symbol of like death being near. So also you'll notice like on either side of me are the two great Civil War generals, Grant and Lee, kind of reaching out from the past and touching me. And I felt that was a way of symbolizing like, yes, this, people say like, oh, Civil War, that was a long time ago. Civil rights, like we fixed it, we solved racism. But to me, the experience feels very much still real, and it's like them reaching out from the past, like this great battle that took place where, all of America was involved with either fighting to end slavery or fighting to maintain it, and I don't know, you know the rest. So this is the last scene, last slide from that show. And it really, like the middle image is where the idea for shaped panels came from. Like when I was first working on the show, I had this idea of like, what if there were road signs that kind of pointed out to you that, you're probably going to experience racism ahead. So, prepare yourself. It always feels like when something like that happens, it's like it comes out of nowhere. Like, what if we could just kind of be ready for it? But those could be anywhere. But so I took that and like just the idea of like having signs, and that's where the triangles started to come from, and eventually it got to like even more complex shapes, like the shooting of Philando Castile. But really, this was me really pushing myself outside of my comfort zone, outside of my own comfort zone of being afraid to talk about race head on, and outside of my artistic comfort zone. So that was in 2018, and unexpectedly, I got invited to have another solo show in Brooklyn, New York. These two women who run this gallery follow me on social media. They saw my Troublemaker show and they really loved it, and happened to be in Detroit towards the end of my show and saw it, loved it, and invited me to show with them in that November. So rather than show the same paintings, I had enough time to make all new paintings. And I called that show Racism, Sweet Racism, which they weren't really happy about in the beginning. So, but I like, for me, like this idea of home sweet home, it's like, home should be the place where you feel most safe and protected and loved. But for me, I didn't have that experience. Yes, there was my grandfather, there's other stuff like that was going on with family that I won't get into. But, I was kind of trying to turn that idea on its head and really think about racism at home. I think like a lot of people might experience it, through family members or whatever. It's out there. But, that's what was behind it for me. I was kind of just trying to put it in everybody else's face, like how is it for you, and how is your experience of it in your home, in your life. And the one on the right, is inspired by, when Donald Trump became president, there was a Unite the Right rally in 2017, I believe, and that was the one where Heather Heyer was run down by the guy in the Dodge Challenger. The previous night, there was all the white nationalists who came out, and they're marching around with tiki torches. Weird flex, but I started to use that as a representation of them. And I think this might be the first, not the first time, because there was the other one, but I started to think about the symbolism of race. And so you see like this kind of like Black Panther kind of about to like pounce through this whirling tiki torch tornado. But to me it was like they're kind of pushing pushing it. Like how are we going to respond to this? So I think I have a couple more shots. So this is also at that gallery, and so I'm starting to think more about what's happening around the country, and beyond law enforcement and these shootings, but to policies. I mentioned in the beginning with the picture of my parents that until 1967, interracial marriages were illegal. Even though it was abolished, there were still, Alabama still had anti-miscegenation laws on the books until 2000. So, it's not everybody got on board right away. But so the painting on the right is titled "Miscegenation Police," and with all the the white nationalists and the racists coming out of the woodwork after Trump was in office, I started to think about what if there's a return to these kind of laws, to this kind of hatred. And there's more to say about that further on. But the painting on the left is, when I was just graduating high school, at least my junior year, was when the Rodney King beating video came out. And then the following year, I was just graduating high school, and all the police that were involved with that were acquitted, and LA exploded, and the riots happened. And I was living in a little town called Paw Paw, Michigan, and it was terrifying to be a minority in a very small town in Michigan while the whole country is going crazy over racism. Also in the painting, it's really dark, but in the background there's the Flint Water Tower, and on top of the police car is the Black Panther. And I'm starting to think with the Flint thing, thinking about systemic racism. It was still at that time kind of a new concept for me, but I was trying, creating this landscape where all these things are happening, and it's just chaos. But I don't know. I don't know what more to say about that. I think this is the last image from my show in Brooklyn. For the Troublemaker show, I had all these portraits of black men who had been killed by law enforcement. And I remember somebody at that show a woman asked me, how come there's no women in the show? And I was like, oh God, I didn't intentionally mean to ice out women, because as a man, I'm I felt more of a connection to the black men who were being killed. So when I had this, I had all these months to get ready for the next show, I'm going to do these portraits of women, because I'm sometimes a people pleaser, and I want to make sure, but I was like, no, I want to know, I want to know their names, I want to know the stories, and I want to be able to share those stories in art. So these are some of the paintings. I only ended up showing 4, and there's actually 2 more, but some of them were too. They were, like I said, the gallery directors there, they were a little nervous about the show because of the title and the subject matters and all that stuff. But they did cut a couple of the paintings from the show, and whatever, it's fine. But moving on. Oh, this is one more piece, and I think this is an early kind of painting where I'm trying to deal with systemic racism, racism at the government level or policy level, getting beyond the individual racists who do these terrible things and everybody throws their arms up and it's horrible. But I think this was a first early attempt at me thinking about the bigger picture, what is enabling this behavior and these mentalities. So 2019 rolled around. I just had these 2 big solo shows, one in Hamtramck, one in New York. Always my dream to have a show in New York. Coming back from that, I had some time to reflect on those shows and those experiences. And something started to come up for me where I'm these, I kind of was connecting with the Black Lives Matter movement. I was really up in arms about these events that were happening around the country. I'm like, what can I as an artist do to like contribute to that conversation? And I sort of like aligned myself with BLM, even though I wasn't a part of that, and I'm not an activist. I'm just an artist living in Detroit, making his way. And I also started to realize like I didn't feel right about these stories of the shootings. I'm like, is it my place to tell these stories? Like, I don't know. So I started to like really question whether that was really the right way to go with my art. So from that, I started to turn inward again and talk about my experience rather than telling the stories of other people from around the country who I don't really know. One thing that influenced this change was, I believe it was in 2017, there was a Black Panther Party reunion at the Charles Wright Museum in Detroit, the Charles Wright Museum of African American History. And I saw an ad for that. I'm like, oh, that sounds cool. Like the Black Panthers. Like I want to go and learn more about, what they were about. Like, see what some of the former members have to say. And I went, and it was really interesting. There were several former Black Panthers up on the stage, and while they were talking, there was also one like older white woman up there. And when it finally came time, at a certain point, she spoke up, and it turns out she was Lenny Sinclair. Her husband and a couple of his artist friends started the White Panther Party in Detroit. They were huge advocates for the Black Panther Party, and at one point, there's this famous moment where a white person asked a leader of the Black Panther Party, "Is like, I support you, like we support you, we want to join you," and that guy was like, "Well, you can't join the Black Panther Party because you're white. Why don't you start your own party?" And that's what this group in Detroit did. And I was just so like, I love that so much. Like, it was like an example of allyship from the 60s. Whites who were wanting to support the black empowerment, racial equity, and they were making that fight their fight. And there's a lot. When people think about Black Panthers today, they're like, oh God, they were militant. They had guns. Like, they were about, they had guns because they were protecting themselves from law enforcement and the brutality they were subjecting to the black community. So, and they had food co-ops, free breakfast programs for kids, and they were, trying to really uplift the community. And they were allies. So I really love that idea, like being biracial. I'm like, God, what if, my experience where it wasn't necessarily like, I wasn't embraced by certain members of my family, but like, just the idea of like blacks and whites coming together to really try to make a difference and make a change was something I really like loved and embraced. So on the bottom, like, I also started thinking, all this time I've been going back and forth trying to learn history, learn about Civil War, learn about like how do we get here? Like, why does this keep happening? And all these flags on the bottom are places that I lived as a kid growing up. North Carolina, Virginia, Kentucky, Germany also, but that doesn't count. And I, looking back, like these were states, some of these states were in the Confederacy and during the Civil War, and thinking back about, what it must be like for, generations later for the people that are still living there. How has that like filtered down through the generations to today? So I started playing around with the Black and White Panther images, and trying to think about like how can I incorporate that into like what I do, what I love doing. Like I like landscapes, and I started putting them in scenes from around Detroit. These two images are from landscapes from Belle Isle. there wasn't a police car with jacked up with the wheels taken off, but I kind of use that as the idea of a white panther crawling out, like that they're just kind of trying to dismantle this issue with law enforcement. And I started to also, the work became more personal, and I've always been in the middle of black and white. Some people don't like hearing that, they're like, you're black, just stop, and like, but for me, it's like I've always had this sense of, black is this, white is this, and like they're the two sides. Obviously there's complexity in the races and everything, but like you're not allowed to be in the middle. You have to be, you have to be one or the other. And the painting on the left is me, kind of like creating this physical representation of that, and that painting is called Black and White Thinking. And this is kind of where my work starts to turn, just it becomes exclusively black and white. The painting on the right, it's like really intense and violent looking, but it's this idea like it's a guy about to leave home. Home is safe, and then step out into the world where it's a very racially defined society, and he's being forced to like choose. And also around this time, I started thinking about my childhood, and like I said, I moved around a lot. I lived in predominantly white neighborhoods, predominantly black, lower income, middle income, and had the typical experience where like I never really fit in. I never fit in with the white kids, never really with the black kids. Black kids would call me a zebra when they found out that my mom was white, and white kids, like their parents would make me leave because they didn't want their kids hanging out with black kids. So it's like either it's coming from both sides, and but I remember that zebra symbol from my childhood, and I thought that actually that's kind of like a beautiful way of representing interracial identity. So I started to play around with the zebra stripes as a motif, and here's some early examples. And the one on the right, it's called Taurus Burns. And the way that came about is like this really, sometimes creativity has a funny way of working. I was in Chicago, and for some reason, I spent the day with my daughter. She was at school, and for some reason, I kept thinking of centaurs. I think we went to the art museum, and I don't know if I saw one there or what, but it just stuck in my mind. At the end of the night, I Googled centaurs and found that the father of all centaurs his name was Taurus. I'm like, that is beautiful and perfect. So like I knew I had to do a self-portrait as a centaurus, but of course I made a zebra body rather than a horse. And this was one of my favorite pieces from that year. It's called Self-Portrait as a Panther, where, like I said, I really fell in love with the idea of black and white panther allyship, and I wanted to make a panther for myself, because while I align myself with the black experience and the black struggle for equity, racial equity, and all of that, I feel like my experience has also been different because of being interracial. I have a white family and a black family, and you get it. So this is like the first appearance of the zebra panther, me creating a symbol of strength and beauty in a powerful panther figure. I don't know why I put this here. So, also at this time, this was 2019, I was teaching at CCS, a figure drawing class. I got invited to teach. And these are just some sketches. Like I said, I've always loved figurative art, and it's still one of my favorite things to do is to go to figure drawing sessions and have a model to sketch. And the ones on the left are old school traditional charcoal and paper, and really I've been doing digital work, and it's really cool because it records it as you draw. So we're getting closer to the present. 2020, I got a studio in Detroit, and this was right before COVID hit. So we had COVID. Then George Floyd was murdered, and the whole world just felt like extremely anxious and fearful, and you were there, so you get it. But this was, I got a studio outside of my home. I was able to paint again. At home I was, I had a tiny studio in my basement, so here I can paint again. I can open up the windows and work with oils. So that's what I did. And I continued with the black and white work. This picture, this is my studio, and the first thing I did was a series of 30 paintings where I was trying to combine the figurative work that I was doing with the racial symbolism that I was playing with. So I took my figure drawings as studies for these paintings, and I just tried to find ways to incorporate the two together. It's a little clunky, but I was like, let me just try this and see how it works out. This is a digital image that I felt like it encapsulated kind of the chaos of the protests. The protests weren't chaotic, but eventually, as I'm sure you remember, there started to be these counter protests that really took away from what kind of sparked the whole thing in the beginning. So, in a way I was like, all right, there's protesters, counter-protesters, how are we going to get anything done? So, and they're not going to come together, so I'll bring them together in a single image. And this is that. One of the highlights from that year for me was, again, exploring the zebra panther image. And, in 2020, George Floyd was killed, Breonna Taylor, and many others. There was those things they kept happening over and over again. Yet there was this pushback by the counter protesters, just it's I don't know. It was there was a refusal to acknowledge that this racism is a problem, and for me, that kind of thing. It's almost like this gaslighting thing where it's like you see it happening right in front of your eyes, but people are in denial. So I wanted to create this image of I've got my zebra panther hiding in the woods from this group of clan figures hunting for him. So I wanted to create this scene of what it's like to feel like a target, to feel hunted. So 2021, last fall, this time last year, I got invited to another solo show. This one was called Defensive. And the idea for this show was, inspired by the 2020, the protests, the chaos, the denial. So for me, defensive has two meanings, right? One is protecting yourself. Defensive, protecting, armed. I was thinking of armed defense, but also defensive as being sensitive to criticism, which had been going on for years. The kneeling during the national anthem and the anger that brought out in people. You don't like it when you disrespect the flag or challenge this idealized image of America. So all those things I was thinking about when creating this body of work. Again, politics. I don't like to go there, but I do need to deal with the anger and just the denial of what's happening there. So the image on the right, every once in a while I'll bring out these mythological figures like the centaur and Cyclops. It's almost like this simple way of representing narrow-mindedness or only looking at the world through one lens, And I love this painting on the right, because this was actually one of the officers that, was involved with the Breonna Taylor shooting. I can't remember his name, but this is the officer whose bullet is said to have killed her. I took the classic police photo, and instead of posing in front of an American flag, it's the African American flag, which was created by David Hammonds in the 60s. And I tried to, I was like, what if police officers were pledging, to serve and protect the black community equally with whites and all that good stuff. Derek Chauvin, what can you say? That video was just so traumatic, and thinking about, there's people who would defend him, and to me, it's like, how do you reconcile that event, him as a person in law enforcement, and this painting on the right was my way of kind of channeling that anger. I'm like, I'll cut this guy in half, and we can see his insides, and the classic arrest photo, changing the numbers, the height numbers to the numbers of evil, and this the one on the left, it's based on a classic painting. It's slipping my mind right now, but this idea, it's like this ongoing racial war it's still alive today, but I wanted to give it this sense of happening in a coliseum where, in the past, thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of people will come around to watch this horrible fight between man and beast or man and man, but in a way this is kind of a modern version of that. These two paintings, the one on the left, so I mentioned earlier, there was a Rodney King beating when I was in high school. And at the time, when George Floyd was killed, I have a daughter, I have a stepson, and I realized they're the same age I was when the Rodney King beating video came out. And here we are, what was it, 30 years later? No. But I'm like, my kids are going through this thing that I went through when I was a kid, and we've come all this way, and people are like, oh, we had Obama, we've fixed racism because we had a black president. Yet, this horrible event happens, and I'm thinking about my kids, all teenagers at that time living in a society where this kind of thing happens, and it brought up all these feelings for me that I really never processed when I was their age, and so that's what that's about. The one on the right, coming back to a Black Panther figure. I don't know if you saw, but Netflix had this movie, Judas and the Black Messiah, about Fred Hampton, and I didn't know much about him until that movie, and I just thought I learned that he was an amazing leader, and he was able to, before he was killed, bring together the young patriots in Chicago and the Puerto Ricans. He was such a good leader. He was able to unite those three to work together to fight economic insecurity and abuse by law enforcement. And the young patriots, the white, I don't know if it was a gang or whatever, but they actually used the Confederate flag as their symbol. Not because they were racist, but because it's for a recognizable symbol that whites gathered around back in the day. And this was the first time where I inserted myself into this panther image. Well, I mean, I have the zebra panthers, but this one is about Fred Hampton. But I also wanted to I gave the Black Panther a zebra tail because I'm trying to develop those leadership qualities in myself, I guess. The panther is batting around a police badge from the Minneapolis State Police Department as a representation of Derek Chauvin. So yeah, here's Fred Hampton, and yeah. So there's a few more scenes, picture paintings from that show. Defensive. Around this time, I was also learning how to shoot. I had colleagues at work who owned guns, and they would take me out to shoot with them. And I met family members who, from my dad's in the Army. He's got retired Army veteran friends who would take me out to shoot. And this idea of like, you know, to see the video of George Floyd being killed, it's like, you know, it created a lot of fear. And I'm like, what, you know, how would I defend myself in that situation? And of course, like more guns is only going to cause more problems, but the fear that video elicited in me was hard to describe. I remember a couple of weeks after that, George Floyd was killed. I was walking down the street in my neighborhood talking to my friend. I came to an intersection, and there was a car pulling up. I looked up, and it was a cop, you know, in an SUV, and my heart just literally like, I just had a panic attack almost. And just like he looked at me and he kind of waved, and I was just like, oh my God, like it just brought up so much fear. So the whole thing about like if police aren't defending you, who's going to defend you? It's a bit of a conundrum. So some more images, you know, with the one on the right's training day, me shooting guns with an uncle. Portrait of my brother on the left. It's called Brother in the Cornfield. So that was a year ago, my show, Defensive. And again, you know, with every solo show, there's reflection afterwards. Think about what worked, where I want to go from here. And so 2020 rolled around, and I got 2022, sorry. I got contacted by Denise and invited, you know, see if I would be interested in having a show up here. And I was excited for the opportunity and to continue with my work. And for this one, self-evident, I'm really focusing, you know, more on myself as well as like the issue of systemic racism and how to represent that in a way that conveys like, I don't know, the multiple levels of it. So these two, Birth of Zebra Mane and Zebra Mane, they came later, and so in the process of making the work for this show, I've gotten to a point where like, you know, I'll have an idea for a body of work or for a painting. I'll do some sketches maybe, and I'll jump into the painting, and the painting will evolve into more than what I started with. So the Zebra Mane on the right, originally, you know, I had the idea for a figure that, you know, combining the zebra panther with an extra human to create this I don't know, like almost deity figure. And later, the black hands and the white hands came behind it to represent, you know, me, where I'm coming from, and finally the hood was added near the end, and it just dawned on me like this: how can I create that feeling of tension that it has followed me throughout my life? So it's kind of a horrifying image, but it really says a lot about that. And one on the left, obviously, like combining the black and white panthers, like to me, I'm like imagining my parents as like activists, and they're not, but they're great people. But just thinking of like almost kind of being reborn out of that kind of that struggle for equity, racial equity. These are, I think, the first two paintings I did for this body of work. And the one on the left, what did I call it? I can't remember. So, but yeah, I got the title from the book, Marked at Birth. It talks about the history of how blacks were systematically using my train of thought. I'm sorry. So one on the right is me, creating this image of self-love. Something that I've been working on throughout my life is working through like the issue of race, racial tension, and this feeling of being in the middle and not being accepted. I've decided to just accept myself and create work that celebrates that unity and that mixing of race, even when society still at times struggles with it. So sometimes my work gets pretty bizarre, but it's I feel like it's the best way to be able to talk about these complicated issues that are really, for me, like I said, in my mid-30s, I kind of had a breakdown, but I've been building myself back up and really thinking about how the racial divisions and racial tension has infected the way that I think and the way that I look at the world and the way that I deal with these issues. I don't know what more to say about that, but the title, obviously, I won't say the title because it's my wife watched that video and I chose not to. You guys don't know. It's called Two Worlds, One Cup. And on the right, like, this feeling of like being able to see clearly racial tensions and wanting to like help make change, almost like, what I gotta do, like draw from the spirit world to help people like see the light maybe. So the painting on the right is called 13, and that title kind of came later, and I realized when I was looking at it, I was like, oh, the white hands are making an X, and there's 3 black hands going up. It's literally the Roman numeral 13. And I was like, oh, it's perfect. It ties into the 13th Amendment, which we've come to understand has been used to create, the black underclass of felons who were drawn into the prison system during the drug war, which was a racist war against the black community. Because as has been proven, as you probably know, like whites use and distribute drugs just as much as if not more as blacks, but the drug war was targeting the black community because it's not politically beneficial to target the white community in the same way. So that gets into systemic racism, something I've spent more time reading about and trying to understand and make art about. The last few slides, this one, like I mentioned, my dad's in the Army, and I have this very vivid memory as a kid of being on Army bases, and at certain points of the day, they'll play the national anthem, and you're in the military, you're required, you're supposed to get out, or wherever you are, to stand at attention and salute the American flag. And I remember like driving around, and the anthem would start playing, and my dad would literally stop the car, pull over, and get out of the car and stand at attention, or salute a flag while the anthem was playing. And I thought it was such a bizarre ritual. Now that I'm older, there's like been a lot of debate and talk about, people get angry when you disrespect the flag, when you kneel during the anthem or whatever. So that's something that drives me crazy, especially when white people get angry about blacks protesting the flag, but how without acknowledging the reasons why. So this painting on the left came later during this body of work. I didn't plan on painting this. I had a sketch of it and was like, this painting is so just surreal and strange, but I loved it, so I just decided to go ahead and paint it, and it's one of my favorites. So a few more. So the one on the right, I love a lot. So there's, in America, we've had we've not been very good at racial equity, right? For a very long time. So to me, I'm like, oh, how can we get there? How can we do it? So this figure on the right is like actually me combining. It's like a figure that's black, white, and mixed at the same time, but the it's just when there is equality, it's I don't know. It's almost like if how do I say this? I don't even know what to say. Like sometimes it's hard to like express like what the painting says it better than me. Anyway, right now, getting near the end, my fellow Americans. I was thinking a lot about protests, and I went to my very first protest after George Floyd was killed. I took my stepson, and a friend of mine met up with us, and he brought his son, and it was very surreal, but it was very inspiring, and to see so many people come out. People were coming out from around the world in protest of what happened and in support for change. And when I was at the protest, I was like, it's great. It was reassuring and comforting to see so many people, but I wondered, what's it going to take, or what is this really going to do? I don't know. And when the protests were happening, then the counter protests, and it just kind of devolved into arguments and whatever. Like, I'm like, okay, it's another painting where I'm like trying to bring everybody together. And the thing about this painting is I wanted it to feel like when you're standing in front of it, it's your opportunity to speak to America about race. What would you say? I don't know what the solution is, and I don't think any of us do, but it's something that I'm trying to address, obviously, and rather than avoiding it and keeping blinders on and pretending like it's not a problem, I'm encouraging people to think more about it and speak about it. Going back to CCS, like, being one of a handful of people of color there, it's there wasn't much interest in talking about race. That was 20 years ago, and I think because of after George Floyd was killed, obviously there's a lot of more conversation about it now, and we're turning to diversity, equity, inclusion. Like, people are like, and companies are encouraging people to like have these uncomfortable conversations. So in a way, like, I feel encouraged by that because, like, now, yes, like finally we can talk about it. Let's not pretend like it's not an issue anymore. But there's change and there's token gestures, but I don't know. These two. So the painting on the left, I was somewhat inspired by Philip Guston, if you know his work. The last painting with the black guy with the one big eye is kind of a classic Philip Guston portrait. His big-eyed pink figures. But I love that earlier in his career, he did these figurative narrative scenes of Klansmen that. I just thought it was amazing for him to like take that head on, especially at that time when they were still active or very much active, and he was not afraid to kind of shine a light on them and their like deviousness and really call them out on their wickedness or whatever. So for me, that one's called Before Black Lives Mattered, and obviously, yes, Black lives have always mattered. Not necessarily in the United States, but on a fundamental level, yes. We can all agree we all matter, right? But in America, ever since the late 16th century, 17th century, after Bacon's Rebellion, when blacks and white indentured servants rose up against the elite planter class, and suddenly laws started to appear on the books. I'm sorry, there's more to that. I just can't speak on it. I'm running out of steam. I don't know what more to say about these. That's it. Thank you. If anybody has any questions, I'd be happy to answer. And while we're talking, if we're talking, here's a list of some of the books that have really opened my eyes to history of race relations in America, and highly recommend them if you're interested in learning more. So, with that. Oh, yeah.
Hello? Okay, there we go. So obviously, with the scope of your work and as someone who understands in a different way as a biracial person, one of the things that I just wondered is who is your audience? In the sense of you're dealing with all of these heavy things, and identity is always a capital I situation. And for me, it felt like this was your way of reclaiming your space when it comes specifically to family. Mm-hmm. But I guess I would rather hear it from the horse's mouth instead of assume.
Yeah, no, good question. And I don't know who my audience is. I guess I'm still trying to find them. In a way, like, yes, it's I've worked through my family issues, and that's a big part of it. It's a big part of why race is such an issue for me, and why I'm kind of going for it in my work. And yes, I'm kind of creating these images that I think I said earlier, like I wish I would have seen stuff like this when I was coming up, so because it would kind of validate my experiences more. So I'm making it for myself, for other people who might be able to relate, and maybe it's not even, maybe they don't relate to the race part, but something that's been coming up a lot now, obviously, is like the conversation about sexuality, gender identity. You know, there's this conservative fight against, like, you know, they just like, you're a man, woman, you're straight, you're whatever. Like, there's a fight, you know, just for that kind of space. And I relate to that. I'm like, I don't know what it's like to be in this body but feel, you know, like this isn't my gender, but I know what it's like to live in a world that is black and white, you know, where that's polarized. So I think, like, I don't know, that's what I think. I think you get it. So,
thank you.
Yeah, thanks.
Do we have other questions?
So in one of your 2019 works, I forget exactly which one it was, but it was the scene with all the panthers chasing after the zebra panther.
Yeah.
And there was one specifically that wasn't the zebra panther, but was also split black and white down the middle. And I was kind of wondering what that actually meant to you, because it's obviously very similar to the zebra panther in a way, but starkly contrasted as well.
Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, in a way, it's like that's you know, I've got the two sides, like the blacks and the whites, kind of running, chasing this zebra panther, which either, you know, maybe it's a leader, maybe they're chasing after it. Maybe it's not a leader. Maybe they're like not wanting to accept it, so they're trying to chase it down. But I think, yeah, the one in the back is just, in a way, it almost happened. I didn't plan on that, but because it's, you know, almost just because of the composition, I wanted a panther there, and because if it was black, it would throw off the composition. If it was white, it would throw it off. So I was like, I'll just put them together and make a black and white one back there. So it almost like kind of represents an interracial panther Maybe it's like it's related to the one in the front, but like a simpler version. I don't know, but it happened more like because of formal reasons, and I just kind of worked. And yeah, I don't know. Thanks for the question.
Yeah, thank you.
Other questions? Yeah.
Would you say that I mean, even though you just admitted it was a formal situation, would you say that it kind of highlights the integration of the zebra panther for the fact of everything so segmented and like trying to bring to light more integration versus?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, in a way, it's like that one is like a panther split down the middle. It's black, it's white. But for me, like the zebra, like the stripes are so beautiful, and it's almost like this panther that's like integrated like the two races in a beautiful way, rather than just like a boom, boom, black, white, slapped together. So that, yeah, okay.
Do we have any other questions?
Hello. Oh, my fault, y'all. I didn't never hear my voice this loud before. But what's up, Taurus? I'm Dez, and I really like what you said about your artwork, and you pressed the button on a lot of heavy topics in your work. And my question is, when do you know at that moment in yourself as an artist or human to press the button before going to the canvas or your artwork or however you want to express your medium?
I don't know. Yeah, creativity. I think I said it earlier. Creativity works in mysterious ways, right? You know, I'm living in the same country as everybody else, but you know, obviously, like what affects me is different than what affects other people. You know, as I've gotten older, you know, gotten more, you know, comfortable with making art and comfortable with myself. You know, like I've been working on myself and just getting comfortable in my own skin and with my own thoughts and my own ideas and my own beliefs, and more confident in what I want to say. I think, like, you know, the ideas, I don't know, the ideas come. I work out sketches and just I don't know if I'm getting away from your question. Is that, you know, sometimes, like when I did the Troublemaker show, like it was really activated by these things that were happening around the country. It's like, you know, I'm like, as an artist, you know, I'm not an activist. Like I don't know what the solution is. Like nobody really knows, and some people are trying. Some people are a lot smarter than me, and some people aren't. Some people are trying to take us back, you know, and fighting against that kind of change. But for me, like it's really lit a fire in me, and you know, like I've been holding in like the childhood issues for so long, and the experiences that I had, and I just didn't want to keep my mouth shut anymore. And you know, paintings obviously aren't, you know, me screaming in the streets or whatever, but you know, this is what I do. This is my gift, and this is, you know, my way of like working through and talking about these really difficult, painful issues. And I, you know, even that, it's like I don't know how to do that. You know, I've been working on that over these, you know, these last 5 years, especially. But you know, I think you saw in the early work, it's like I was tiptoeing around it. I was afraid to. I was afraid, you know, people didn't want to see this kind of stuff. You know, I'm trying to make it as an artist. I'm trying to sell my work. Like, who's going to buy paintings about racism? Nobody wants to see that, you know. Let's talk about that. Things are a little different now, which is encouraging, but for how long, you know? I don't know. So in a way, it's like, yes, like I make these for myself. Like, I don't know if anybody's going to want to see them, but I want to see them. Like, this stuff, like this life that I've had, it's it's been dark. It's been depressing. I have anxiety. I struggle with anxiety like since I was a teenager, and not all because of racism, but like, I don't know. Like I was thinking about that yesterday. I think like my issues with depression and anxiety. There's always like that conflict about nature versus nurture. Is it a biological thing or is it like your environment? Who's to say? But my environment at home was one thing which definitely impacted me and my self-esteem and my sense of self and all that. But there's also the broader environment of the United States, and there's a certain amount of I don't know. It just can really get to you. There's a real disadvantage to being a person of color still in the United States, and I don't know. I know it's like a difficult thing to fix or solve, and a lot of people don't. Of course, there's lots of problems in the world. The climate change. There's lots of other problems. And a lot of people don't want to think about race. It's just like forget about it. But for me, this is how I want to work through it and deal with it. And my audience, I don't know. Maybe they're out there somewhere. Maybe they're not. But this feels good to me to make this work and to get all those things out. That are really painful and hard to reconcile. So.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Taurus, I think everybody in this room is desperate to say what I want to say, and that's just thank you.
Oh.
You as a thank you for your vulnerability tonight in talking about mental health and in talking about racism and how your life was really ripped down the middle, right, in so many ways. And what you're doing in your art is it brings us together in the moment. And so when I saw the show, I was struck by. I expected to see conflict when I walked into the room, right? But what I kept seeing too was also this sort of dream of harmony. And I didn't know if I was imposing that on the work, but it sounds like that was coming out a little bit in what you were saying toward the end about this show. And the one piece that really that I stared at a lot was the interlocked forearms. I think it was called "The Fear of Letting Go." That really struck me, and I guess what I'm talking about, there was so much interdependence in the work, and so many things that suggested weaving, right, of the two races. So I guess I just want to talk about the title of that piece, or if you could address it. That fear of letting go really struck me, because the piece is about everyone literally. If somebody lets go, we're screwed. Is kind of how I read that. I just wanted you to address that briefly, and just say thank you. And I know we all want to say that to you after this.
Thank you so much. Yeah, that piece, I'll bring it up so we can see it while we're talking about it. I had this funny thought about that painting, actually. Like, I love that they're hanging next to each other in the show. And here I kind of like imagine that painting is like a close-up of the fabric of the flag, like like you're saying, it's like it looks like a weave pattern. What if that's the makeup of the flag? But like this, the fear of letting go. It's like even though like this, we have a problem with racial equity and all that stuff. Like we're so afraid to change. We're on the verge of a lot of different changes in this country. Climate change is forcing our hand. We're going big in electrification of cars, and we're running out of water in parts of the country. We're all going to have to make like drastic changes in our lives, but we're so reluctant and afraid to change. Like change is scary. I face that. I think we all do. It's not all just about me. Like there's times in our lives when there's just huge changes that we're faced with making, and sometimes we don't. We don't take that step, or we don't go there. It's just too scary. And I think as far as race relations in America, like things have been bad or things have been the way they are for so long. And yes, there's like, there's a lot of people who want change, who want things to be better, but it's letting go of what we're familiar with, even though it's like, it reminds me of this thing where like people who won't leave a bad situation because it's familiar, even though they know it's bad for them, they'll stay in that situation, because they're afraid of like what else might be out there. And yeah, I think that gets at that. So, thanks.
Taurus, I've heard you say a couple times tonight that you are not an activist, and I'm wondering if you are willing to submit that the types of paintings that you're making now and the difficult conversations that you're having with them and the level of vulnerability and sort of discomfort that you're offering the viewer in having these conversations, if you would submit that might be your own form of activism.
Yes, I mean, it's definitely, I'm definitely like protesting the race relations in America and our inability to move forward in a lot of ways. And yeah, so, but yeah, I say like I'm not an activist. I don't like to get involved with politics. I don't like the debate. I'm painting my thoughts, my ideas, my, things that I learn about, and as my understanding about race evolves, and I work through my stuff and think about these bigger issues. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, activist. I don't know. It's art. Like sometimes I wonder, like, what can art do? Obviously, art can do a lot. Art has been a huge part of like revolutionary movements. But still, it's like I'm just like a dude in Detroit. I have a family. I have a full-time job. I'm like, I don't know. I'm making these art that I know that they're really connecting with these movements and that fight, but I don't know. I don't know what to say.
Well, activism can take many forms, I think, and it can be. I think using your gift to its fullest, and speaking in your most fluent language, which is visual and painting, is its own form of activism. It doesn't have to be rising up in the streets or pounding the pavement to government officials, but it's really a powerful form of activism, and I'm really grateful to you for coming here tonight and bringing this work to our university and to everybody here, and for sharing your entire self with us tonight. Thank you so much. This was really fantastic.
Thank you.
Everyone, please join us down in the baby room for some snacks, and you can ask Taurus questions up close if you didn't get a chance to ask something tonight. Thank you so much for being here.